Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. I am Kyle.
And I'm Matthew.
And this, of course, is Audio Judo, your podcast of music discovery. If you're a fan of Audio Judo, you might enjoy one of our other podcasts, Throughline, where host Christian investigates the common thread running through an album. Is in its second season right now. Still more pieces to that coming soon, hopefully. And Audio Judo does jazz, where host Chris talks about the history and stories behind some of your favorite jazz albums and musicians. There's some classic episodes of that you can go listen to anywhere podcasts are podcast, and hopefully some new episodes coming soon.
It's classics.
All three of those, some classics. Audio Judo does jazz classic.
Classic.
The classic. All three of those are all proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network. If you're a music fan, there's something for you on Pantheon with over 100 podcasts in their network to choose from. When you're done listening to Audio Judo and our sister podcasts, go check out some of Pantheon's other shows at pantheonpodcasts.com. Matthew.
Well, that was well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You have picked an absolute prog rock masterpiece of an album this week. And I honestly have been waiting for this one for a while. I knew you were eventually going to get to this album.
Yeah.
I knew it's an album that you enjoy a lot.
Yeah, I do.
And I'm curious to know.
Didn't, but do.
Didn't, but do.
Yes.
I'm curious to know why it took us so long to get here.
Well, we'll get there. Yeah, it's a slow roll. So over the course of the last few months, or at least this season 6, it's become very apparent to me that people respond or comment about a lot of our episodes. They're fans of progressive rock music. Episodes we have done either at the end of season 5 or through all of season 6 about Yes and Rush, Genesis, Porcupine Tree have not only garnered twice as many, but 5 times as many views on YouTube as most of our regularly scheduled episodes. Not all of them are positive, and that's okay. So I'm not entirely sure what that is, but something tells me that if they are fans of the genre like I am, they have very strong opinions about what they think things mean or mean to them, and also probably have listened to these albums hundreds and hundreds of times and know all of the ins and outs. So I've decided with the end of season 6 upon us with this episode to really lean into that in season 7. So I'm going to do several progressive albums in season 7.
Oh, all right.
And it starts today with what is, for some, the mother of all progressive rock albums. Perhaps the earliest example of progressive rock, at least with a significant fan base anyway. There are more that existed, but we're talking about 1969's In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. So yeah it's a heck of a record.
Yeah, it is.
And it takes some getting into for listening to it. Again, I think we're running into this problem about albums that influenced so many things, just like with Velvet Underground. It was so far ahead of its time that you listen to a progressive rock album now and then go back and listen to this and you're like, I don't see what the big deal is. There's nothing to it. But there is something to it. There's a lot to it.
When you mentally transport yourself, when you mentally transport yourself back to the idea of like, this was 1969, there was no Rush, there was no Genesis, there were none of the other prog rock bands that you've ever heard of existed, and then this hits the scene, and it's their first album.
Yes.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
And this blasts onto the scene, and it's like, this is so different from, I guess I shouldn't say that. It really isn't super different. There's a lot of little elements of psychedelic music pulled in here. There's a lot of elements of like the 60s and 50s and 60s, like freeform jazz that are pulled in here. There's some classical elements that are
orchestral stuff.
Timeless orchestral that are, hundreds of years old at this point. But they all sort of, they took them and they melded them together in a completely new way. And like you said, you listen to it now and it's like, oh, it's a prog rock album.
Yep.
But at the time, it must have been absolutely mind blowing for some people. And it was probably also absolute shit for some other people that were like, what the fuck are they doing? This is garbage. But that's how all albums are. So
yeah, you're 100% right. So this first album was the most commercially successful of their careers. a career that lasted from 1969 to 2021, spanned dozens of musicians, was
Mm-hmm.
also very successful on the charts. It got to number 5 in the UK, number 28 in the States for a prog album. That's incredible. It was certified gold. And if you add up all the sales, it's probably somewhere around 1 million worldwide, which, for albums that we've talked about, that's not that big of a deal. But you have to remember what genre this is, what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about. In 2015, the album was ranked number 2 on Rolling Stone's list of the 50 greatest prog rock albums of all time, behind Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, another record that we've covered, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's got jazz, it's got classical, it's got symphonic. It's one of the very first records to marry those styles into rock music and also have strange, kind of esoteric, symbolic lyrics within it, not just psychedelic, weird shit, but
Yeah.
stuff that meant things, even like social things. That
Yeah.
stuff that if you were doing that, you were instantly, it was a protest song. If you were doing
Mm-hmm.
something about the war, it was a protest song. It was labeled as such because of the time we were living in. That's middle of the Vietnam War. They were able to do it as a British band, not even an American band, a British band doing
Yeah.
this Vietnam stuff. And they did it in such a dark, twisted kind of way, addressing it straight on, not like, oh, I hope my brother comes home from the war. They're like, we're talking about napalm and I
Yeah.
mean, it's right there in it. Uh, so it has elements. It also has elements of what would become metal and
Mm-hmm.
alternative, as well as these very weird stylings and syncopated parts that kind of showcase what kind of musicians they actually were, which were incredible.
Yeah.
Which is where you get that kind of progressive. The stereotype is if you're in a progressive band, you must be really, really good at your instrument.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but that is what became the stereotype through time. Critical acclaim for this album was almost universal. Almost.
Mm.
Most critics
Almost.
most critics love
Hmm.
the album. Even Rolling Stone magazine said it combined aspects of many musical forms to create a surreal work of force and originality. That's that's all right. But our
Yeah.
pal, because who will never make it completely off my shit list,
No.
Robert Christgau said he called it ersatz shit and gave it a D plus. See, and I had to look up what that word meant. Ersatz. It means substitute or replacement. So replacement shit?
Substitute shit.
Substitute for what? I wish I knew what he was trying to say because it makes no sense. What if you don't like it? Just say you don't like it. What you have to make people like. What is he saying?
So
Ersatz shit.
you know how there's that long time thing where, if I ever get a time machine, I'd go back in time and kill Hitler, or I'd
Yeah,
I'd stop a natural disaster or something.
sure.
I would go back and knock the thesaurus out of a young Robert Christgau's hand, just at 8 or 9 years old. He's like, "What's this?" And I'd just show up out of nowhere and smack it out of his hand. And like, "I've saved the world!" And then I'd Marty McFly, just disappear.
Right? How
And
many
then,
albums would sell more
oh my
copies?
god, hundreds.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
It might actually, for all we know, it might hurt album sales.
You
Because
think?
at least, if nothing else, I mean, the saying, even bad publicity is still
His
publicity.
That's true.
So potentially, somebody might hear about an album that they've never heard of before, and like, well, this guy hated it, but what is this? In the Court of the Crimson King? That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Let's take a look. And then they pick it up and listen to it, and their mind is blown.
Right, and they see the album cover and they're like, "Why does he hate this so much?
Yeah,
This looks really
oh man,
interesting."
it
Yeah, so
does.
right. So, before we talk about In the Court of the Crimson King, just take a few minutes, talk about the band that made it. That would be King Crimson. And there's
Hmm.
not going to be too much to say at this point because this is their first record. So we're just going to take
Yeah.
them up to the first album. So in August 1967, two musician brothers, Michael and Peter Giles, drummer and singer, respectively, who had been working in bands in Dorset, England for several years, advertised for a singing organist for a band that they were working on putting together.
Which I want to point out is not a code word for underground gay sex. Singing organist.
Singing.
I was 100% sure. I was like, oh, you're looking for a singing organist, huh? Oh yeah, sure you are.
Wink, wink.
No, it's not.
Oh,
It's just they were looking for somebody who could sing and play the organ.
so they were looking for a legitimate
A
singer
legitimate
organist.
musician, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So a young chap, also from Dorset, responded to the ad. Hey, fun thing about that is he could neither sing nor play the organ. But he responded anyway, and his name was Robert Fripp. And even though he couldn't do either of the things that they were looking for, he was a guitarist by trade, they must have had some sort of chemistry in these first initial meetings. And the trio of Giles, and Fripp was born. They quickly churned out a few singles and an album, even. The Cheerful Insanity of Giles, and Fripp. Did you listen to this record?
I did not. But they definitely, like, just from reading about them in this period, they sound like they were having a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Almost maybe a little too much. Like, it sounds like they were kind of having, like, a little bit, like, they weren't taking anything seriously, which is fair enough. I mean, they're making, they're having fun. They're making art. They're making music. But, like,
right.
I got the feeling from reading the history of this period of their careers that it was like, somebody needs to kind of, like, we need to pull it back, like, one step and, like, hey, let's actually focus and make something marketable and good and that we enjoy.
It's bizarre. It's such a weird album, that album that they put out, which it's but it's appropriate for the time. So it's all these jazz numbers that were linked together with comedic spoken word pieces. So it's almost like Monty Python, like, meets light jazz or jazz improv. And they had a television appearance at that point, but they didn't really find a following. Can't imagine why. But they attempted to expand their sound at that point, so they recruited Ian McDonald on keyboard, reeds, and woodwind instruments. And he brought along two people with him, his then girlfriend, Judy Dibble, from the Fairport Convention, and she was only in the band for a short time because they broke up. And lyricist / roadie / art strategist Peter Sinfield, with whom he had been writing songs. Fripp, meanwhile, saw the band Clouds, of which they were a member, at the Marquee Club in London, which spurred him to incorporate classically inspired melodies into his writing, and he started to improv a lot more often. And if you know anything about King Crimson post 1970 something, it's improv is essentially what it became.
Yeah.
Like, not jam band, not we're going to noodle on this for 45 minutes. I mean, it was like legit jazz improv.
Yeah.
And with
I was about to say, it's a lot more like a jazz trio or quartet rather than like a fish, like, hey, here we're going to noodle for an hour and everybody take as many drugs as you possibly can. Like,
right. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a much different setup. I know that probably if you're listening and you don't know who I'm talking about, King Crimson or Fish, you're probably like, what's the difference? One's jazz, one's improv, one's like noodling and jamming. Well, they're not quite the same. Yeah. There is a distinct difference. So one thing that go ahead.
I was going to say, I was once told, I actually took a class in college that was an appreciation of jazz class. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this, I think, in an episode of Audio Judo Does Jazz.
We did.
Yeah. It actually kind of ruined jazz for me because the professor was such a strict asshole about it. But one of the things that I do remember from that class is him talking about how, they call it improvisation, but it really isn't. Because most of the time, those musicians are working at such a high level that by the time they get there, they've already thought about what they're going to do.
Oh, yeah.
And how they're going to play it. And they know what the framework of this song is because they've rehearsed the rest of the song so much. And they know, oh, I'm going to roll into this and we're going to roll in at this tempo. And, the mood is going to be this. And I'm going to do these things to change that mood, make things more exciting or make things more dark or make things more light or make things, faster or slower or whatever. And they're going to do all that. And they already have it in their head when they go into it. And there may be some elements of spontaneity there. But the reality is they've already thought it through and it's a complete thing in their head. They just have to make it become reality. Whereas to me, noodling is much more of and it's my turn, and I'm just going to start playing some notes. And maybe they have a few, oh, hey, this was the thing I was doing the other day. And they just kind of noodle. They
Right.
just fiddle around and play their instrument for a while. And then when
Someone
they're
picks a key and someone picks a
exactly,
tempo, and then they just go. And
exactly. And then they just kind of go for as long as they feel like. And then when they're
right,
kind of done, like,
meanders
yeah,
around.
somebody take it drums, and then it kind of meanders over to the drums. So that's the difference, in my opinion.
I'd say you're right. I'd say you are correct
Sweet.
about that. So
Yes. Aha, finally.
you got
Aha,
it.
right about something. Aha.
So one thing that everyone would come to know about Robert Fripp is he's a tinkerer, he's an inventor,
Mhm.
he's an all-around weird guy who doesn't really like to do anything that is status quo. He's always experimenting and looking for the next thing, whatever the next thing is. Not necessarily the next big thing, but the next thing. So at this point, he was already bored of the pop songs that Peter Giles was writing and suggested to his old friend and singer, who was also from Dorset, guitarist Greg Lake, that he should either replace Peter Giles or he should replace him, Robert Fripp.
Yeah.
Robert Fripp's like, I'll step out, you replace me. And Peter was already kind of bored of the band himself and just said, you know what? We're not getting popular. This isn't fun anymore. I'm going to step out. And so you can put whoever you want in. So
Mm.
so that's what they did. So now it's a band of 5. He's got, Michael Giles, Robert Fripp, Ian McDonald, Peter Sinfield, and now Greg Lake. And that's the original incarnation of King Crimson.
Mm.
And it's an incarnation of the band that would only last the first album. So they first got together on November 30th, 1968, and Peter Sinfield coined the band's name in what he called a moment of pressured panic.
I love that.
He had already used the term Crimson King in a set of lyrics before his involvement with Fripp. He insisted that the name wasn't Beelzebub, Prince of Demons, and that a Crimson King was any ruler during whose reign there were societal rumblings and dark forces working in the world. Okay.
However,
Yeah.
Robert Fripp then later said, King Crimson is a synonym for Beelzebub, which is an anglicized form of the Arabic phrase Bil Shabab, meaning the man with an aim.
Yeah.
So,
Which made sense to him. Like,
yeah.
I got an aim. I'm aiming to making some music.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. So
Bil Shabab.
Bil Shabab. So now with the band, it's completely different than it was when they first got together. The main songwriter was with vital contributions from Fripp and Lake, and Sinfield wrote all the lyrics on his own. Also designed and operated the band's very unique stage lighting at the time, and he's credited on the album with words and illumination, which I always thought meant something more highbrow than he was in charge of.
Like mentally opening, like, ooh, we've illuminated.
Right.
Not
I thought
physically, like I unshuttered some lights.
I thought it was that. I didn't think it was I didn't think it was like, oh, he's in charge of the lighting board. Cool.
It does sound they picked a very good word there, because if it just said lighting, you'd be like, oh. But because it says illuminations, it's like, ooh, what does that mean? Ooh, what does that mean?
So Ian McDonald said, hey, let's get a Mellotron because everyone's using it. And that became a very integral part of their sound. And Peter Sinfield described the band. He said, if it sounded at all popular, it was out. So it had to be complicated. It had to be more expansive chords. It had to be strange influences. If it sounded too simple, we'd make it more complicated. We'd play it in 7/8 or 5/8 just to show off. Just to show off, you ask? Yes, just to show off. And I don't understand why people that don't relate to progressive music have such a problem with that. Classical music, which has been around for centuries now, is full of show-offs.
Oh, yeah.
It's full of how many notes can the violinist possibly play in this section. And we can make this movement a really weird time signature. And how is that different from jazz? It isn't. And that's why I get my hair up when people bash progressive music and then turn around and listen to classical and then in the same breath call progressive music pretentious. It's irritating when people call it pretentious because it isn't. It's just musicians playing their instruments at a high level. And I don't know why that's a problem.
See, I think that there's I don't know how to describe this here. I think that there is a thing where any art form, because of the way that we teach art in the West in particular, it's like when you're taught art as a child, right? Whether it's music, whether it's drawing, whether it's painting, whether it's writing, whether it's anything like that. You're taught like, oh, you should enjoy this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it should be fun for you. And you should, oh, coloring, that's fun. Playing your little instrument, that's fun. What ends up happening is 80% of the population ages out of that. Right?
Right.
Oh, hey, I used to have fun. I learned to play the harmonica when I was a kid, and then I aged out of it, and I haven't touched one since I was 12 years old. Whatever. But in their minds, they're like, oh, that was that fun kid's toy that I used to play with.
Oh.
That remaining 20-ish% of people who continue to play an instrument, maybe become a little bit more professional, maybe join a band or play in the high school band or play in a college band or play in a marching band or something like that. They take it a little bit more seriously and they become a little bit more professional about it. And then maybe that, what are we going to say, 1% of those people who actually go on to join the music industry, they become actual musicians, whatever. They now have that entire legacy that 99% of the population now has of either, oh, that was that fun thing I did when I was a kid and then I moved on from, or that was that thing I did all the way up through college and high school, but I've moved on from that now. And there's that stigma around it that like, oh, well, they must be not doing anything serious. That must just be fun for them. That must just be a thing that they enjoy doing. That must not, it's hard to think of it as like, no, that's actual work. That's actual skill. It's something they have to keep working at and keep going and keep going and keep going to stay talented and to stay relevant with it.
Sure.
And I think that what ends up happening is when people are incredibly talented at it and they are very relevant and they have put in the work to remain talented and relevant in playing their instrument, people then think of them as pretentious because they're like, well, that's something that kids do for fun. Right. That's something I did in high school is to pass the time after school and to hang out with my friends. I was in the marching band or I was in whatever. Versus, no, this is actually a legitimate art form that people are spending time to develop and to work on. And then when they try to share it, like you said, people are like, well, that's pretty pretentious that you're taking your, little hobby or whatever and trying to force it on me and tell me you're the best at
it. I'd say that's a fair assessment. That's actually a very profound assessment.
It's very, very wordy and very long, but it's
you got something right, and I called you profound.
Yes. Oh, sweet! I am rolling on it today. This is awesome.
That's a huge win. We're done here.
double win. We need to record earlier more often. I'm apparently
start earlier
before 7:00. I'm like firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. So
this is great.
So the band, they're together now. Their first gig was in April of 1969, and then a few months later, that all changed when they warmed up for a little band called the Rolling Stones at Hyde Park Festival in London. Estimated attendance, 500,000.
Right? What?
Gig 3, 500,000.
Yeah.
Huh? That'll take you.
I tried to find some numbers. My best guess is the Speakeasy Club in London maybe packed 250 people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Couldn't see what their second gig was, but I'm assuming probably something really similar. Let's say 500 people. Let's say they found a little theater or something and they played for 500 people, right? Third gig, 500,000 people. 100,000 times.
Yeah.
More than they had played for before.
I feel like
I'm sorry, not 100,000, 10,000 times more.
I feel like that's a normal curve, right?
Yeah.
Is that what normal bands do? 100, 250, 500,000.
Yeah. 500,000. Just jump right up there.
Just a normal step.
I can't do math. 1,000 times more.
I knew you were going to get there eventually.
I'll get there.
I didn't want to harp on it. So, considering the band doesn't have a lot of history here, I'm just going to give you a little synopsis of each individual's history.
Ooh,
just to figure out where we're at. Because the band, like I said, gig 3. Hadn't been doing anything yet. So Robert Fripp was born in Wimborne, Minster, a town in Dorset, like I said, second child of a working-class family. And in 1957, at age 11, he received a guitar for Christmas from his parents and recalled almost immediately, I knew that this guitar was going to be my life. It's weird when
Ooh.
people know that stuff. So he was inspired by Elvis Presley's guitarist, Scotty Moore, to play rock and roll, but then he quickly moved on to jazz at age 13, traditional jazz, and then modern jazz at age 15. He's cited Charlie Parker and Charles Mingus as huge musical influences during that time, and we know about him. Those two guys from Audio Judo Does Jazz. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Yeah.
So in 1961, Robert Fripp at 15 formed his first band, the Ravens. They split the next year, and then he concentrated on his O-level studies at school, joined his father's firm as a junior negotiator. So it sounds like his father was an attorney in England. He intended to study estate management and eventually take over his dad's business. But at 17, he decided to become a professional musician, because that's what you do. And he was a guitarist in a jazz outfit called the Douglas Ward Trio, and he played up and around in Dorset. And in 65, he left the group to attend Bournemouth College, where he studied economics, still kind of on the fence about what he was going to do. He went to see the Duke Ellington Orchestra in February of 65, an experience that moved him deeply. And there's a lot of things that he took from Duke Ellington that we'll talk about later. He subsequently spent 3 years playing light jazz in the Majestic Dance Orchestra at the Bournemouth's Majestic Hotel, replacing one Andy Summers from The Police, who had left that gig to go play with Zoot Money, right? So there's a lot of connections in there. So during this time, he also met musicians he would collaborate with later in his career: John Wetton, legend, Richard Palmer James, and Greg Lake. At 21, going back home from college late at night, he turned on Radio Luxembourg when he heard the Beatles' Day in the Life, the last notes of The Day in the Life by the Beatles, and he was galvanized by that experience. He went on to listen to the Beatles' 67 album, Sgt. Pepper's, and all kinds of other things. Hendrix, Bela Bartok, Dvorak, like all kinds of John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. So it's clear he's got influences across the board. And many years later, he will recall that although all the dialects are different, the voice was the same, and I knew I couldn't say no. Basically saying music. All the dialects are different, but it's still the same voice. As a band leader, he pointed out that Miles Davis and Duke Ellington inspired him to seek constant change, which is reflected in how King Crimson evolves. Greg Lake was born in 1947 in Dorset. He discovered rock and roll in 1957 when he bought Little Richard's Lucille. So these guys are honed on early rock and roll. At the age of 12, he first learned to play the guitar, wrote his first song, Lucky Man, which he didn't write down, and he just committed it to memory. Joined his first band, Unit 4, playing cover songs, and he did a bunch of stuff. But during he was doing a gig in Carlisle, England, he got pneumonia, continued to perform on stage. His bandmates refused to drive back home that night and let him sleep in the van, where he woke up blue. And when he got home, he was almost dead. It was probably the worst thing ever experienced. Quit the band, joined Crimson just a couple months later. So lucky for them, he almost died. Or else he may have stayed with Unit 4 instead, or Time Checks, another band he was in. Ian MacDonald was born in 1946 in Middlesex, England. He grew up in a very musical family, listened to records, taught himself guitar, but he went back to orchestra later on, where he took clarinet, learned to read music, learned how to play the piano, the flute, the saxophone. So he's got this really great adaptability. He started joined the Army and played in the Army band, as he had to learn as many musical styles as possible to entertain the soldiers, since they didn't want to just hear one style. And that's where he kind of honed his style. Peter Sinfield is the outlier of the band. So he was a travel agent, and then he secured a job in the computer industry. Remember, this is the 60s computer industry. And so to compete with his art school friends, he learned to play the guitar, and he wrote poetry and stuff, and started designing kites and lampshades and custom-made clothing. He spent a bunch of years drifting around Morocco and Spain, because that's what you do, before he returned to England. In 1967, he formed The Creation, a band he said he envisioned as a cross between Donovan and The Who. I don't like that mix. But one of the members of the band, Ian MacDonald, who was also in The Creation, convinced him to switch from singer to lyricist. So clearly, better writer than singer. And that gets you up to speed because the album, like we said, we're going to talk about In the Court of the Crimson King, was the band's debut album, released on October 10th, 1969, to critical acclaim and commercial success. And its legacy has been cemented through the years. We often talk about an album being ahead of its time, not being appreciated for the influence that it was. And this is so true because you don't. It's years later when bands start to talk about this band as, oh, this album meant so much
They
to
were
me.
yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To kind of add to that, there were so many. So, like, music critic Jim DeRogatis, in his book "Turn on Your Mind," said that "In the Court of the Crimson King" is, quote, the album that got the progressive ball rolling. Q and Mojo Classic Special Edition, Pink Floyd and the Story of Prog Rock book. This album came in fourth in its list of 40 cosmic rock albums. In 2014, readers of Rhythm voted it as the eighth greatest drumming album in the history of prog rock. 2015, you already said this one, but Rolling Stone named it second in their list of best prog rock albums of all time, only after Dark Side of the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And none other than The Who's Pete Townshend is quoted as calling this album, quote, an uncanny masterpiece.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I have a
amazing
couple of
how many
quotes from him later on as well, because he's kind of all over the board. But
yeah.
you want to talk about? Let's talk about the album artwork for a second.
Oh,
because
my God.
So it's one of the most unsettling and
Mhm.
iconic album covers in the history of music. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's become this iconic album cover, and the story behind it is very sad.
Yes. Yeah. So
Please continue. Sorry.
Barry Godber, he's a computer programmer who was a friend of Peter Sinfield's, painted the design for the album cover, and he used his own face, viewed through a mirror, as the model. And unfortunately, Godber died in February 1970 from a heart attack. Shortly after this album came out, he was 24, and
Yeah.
it was his only painting that he ever did.
Yeah. He went to art school. He went to the Chelsea Art School, and learned to, like, paint and draw and do all these things, but never really took it up as like that part of it as a career. And like you said, he moved on to working with computers as a computer programmer, which at that time was a lot of very manual, like punch cards,
yeah,
stuff and things like that. And then was approached. Wow, it's just totally, yeah. He was approached by Peter Sinfield.
Yeah,
I don't know why his name escaped my brain there.
That's
Hey, here's some music that the band is working on. I want you to listen to this. And one of the songs they played was 21st Century Schizoid Man, the 1st track on this album. And he was like, I'm gonna draw that and I'm gonna make a painting out of it. And he did. And that became the cover of the album.
Yeah, it's so weird. So Robert Fripp now owns the original painting. Mm-hmm. He said that Peter brought this painting in and the band loved it. And he said, I recently recovered the original from our record label offices because they kept it exposed to bright light at the risk of ruining it, so I ended up removing it. The face on the outside of the cover is the Schizoid Man, and on the inside of the gatefold, it's the Crimson King. And he said that he had only known parts. Barry Godber, the guy who designed it, had only heard parts of it, and of the record when he made the painting, and that's why Fripp said it was so like serendipitous, because they didn't, like, he had no idea that that's kind of where they were headed, and it was just such the perfect cover to represent what was inside. He said the Crimson King, which is on the inside gatefold, if you cover his face, the eyes look like they're just about to cry, even though he's smiling, and it's very unsettling. Yeah. So I used to get completely freaked out by this cover whenever I saw it when I would be thumbing through my brother's record collection. It was always really unsettling. I used to turn it around in the bin when I would go looking for a Rush album because it bothered me so much, so I would just flip it around. So my familiarity with this record started at a very young age, like 10 or 11 years old. So my family used to eat dinner together every night. We were every bit the nuclear family. Unless there was some sort of pressing sports practice or music rehearsal, dinner was at 5:30, between 5:30 and 6 every night, right after my dad got home from work. And sometimes it was just casual conversations. Sometimes there were heated arguments at the table. It was pretty standard Midwest fare, this is what we do. And occasionally my brother would break up the monotony by asking if he could put a record on in the living room during dinner instead of the omnipresent sound of the nightly news, which is what was happening at 5:30 and 6, Peter Jennings, whoever, Dan Rather, whatever channel my dad happened to land on that night. And sometimes my parents were receptive, sometimes not. I remember hearing the album Looking for Clues by Robert Palmer this way. And so, some of that seeped in. And being the music fan that I was, and at that time in complete awe of my big brother, I always liked when he got his way. In this fashion, I heard this record for the first time at the dinner table. The overdriven vocals, the strange syncopated sections, and the chaos of the end of the first song were not my cup of tea at 11 years old. It was so far past what I was used to that I couldn't stand to listen to it at that age. Truth be told, when I put it together with the album cover, it kind of freaked me out. Like, the music that was contained inside, with the exception of I Talk to the Wind, kind of bothered me. It was dark, it was noisy, and not really melodious in parts, and that first opinion kind of colored my thoughts about King Crimson for a long, long time. And it wasn't until years later, probably 5 or 6 years later, when I was really in an experimental phase of listening to music, that I tried it again. But not this album. I tried an album called Three of a Perfect Pair, had Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew and a much different set of King Crimson players, Tony Levin, and I found something that I liked. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. Let me go back and listen to this album again without the baggage of being completely freaked out every time it started. And then I realized what I had missed. And with the, not being 10 years old and probably still wanting the bathroom light left on when I was going to bed, to now like, no, yeah, let me hear that weird shit. I want to hear it. So now, fast forward however many years it is, I've listened to it several hundred times, like every other prog fan does. And that's why we're going to talk about it.
That's cool. It was your news of the world.
Yeah.
The album cover freaked you out.
It absolutely did. It News of the World by Queen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you not seen that episode of Family Guy?
Oh, no.
There's an episode of Family Guy where Stewie finds that album and it freaks him out so bad he can't look at it, but he keeps hiding it and then somebody keeps pulling it back out.
Oh, so yeah, very much like that. Yeah, it really bothered me. And the Inside guy didn't bother me any less because he was smiling and his eyes were sad. And trying to connect those two things, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Why is Mike listening to this freaky shit? And now I get it.
Right.
So we want to take a break and then come back and do 5 tracks?
Let's do it.
Okay.
5 whole tracks.
5 whole tracks.
Man, I don't know if we can.
Hello, this is Matthew from Audio Judo. Are you looking for additional Audio Judo content? Stuff that will make you laugh with an emphasis on music? Then you need to subscribe to our Patreon page, and this is how you do it. First thing, head to our site, patreon.com/audiojudo. Our Patreon site is the only place you're going to find all the extras that we work so hard to provide. There are Judo Chops, which are mini episodes. There are bits that are taken out of episodes for whatever reasons. Some bloopers, some full interviews with artists like Steve Hackett from Genesis. We have 3 tiers currently. There is the Shout It Out Loud tier, which would only cost you $1 in the US. For that amount, you get a shout out by name at the end of each episode. For $5 a month, little step up, the front row tier, you get a shout out on each episode, early access to full episodes, and access to all the bonus content. With a more significant investment, $20 a month, the backstage pass tier, you get everything that is available at the other tiers, a special personalized gift from Kyle and I. Most importantly, after paying for 1 year, you get to host an episode of Audio Judo with me and Kyle on the album of your choosing. We have completed several of these. They're a ton of fun. You can find the link to our Patreon account on our website, audiojudo.com. But if you can't find it there, it is patreon.com/audiojudo. Thanks for subscribing. And now back to the pro. 21st
Welcome back.
century schizoid man.
Oh, such a good
Schizoid,
name. First of all,
it is.
first of all, first of all,
First of all,
first of all,
so
I am.
schizoid, personality
Yeah.
disorder. It's a
Mm-hmm.
personality disorder, often associated with multiple personalities. The medical definition is extreme social withdrawal and trouble
Mm-hmm.
forming personal relationships. The lyrics, which were written by Peter Sinfield, take us into the mind of a troubled individual with dark imagery and references to the Vietnam War. References that are pretty obvious: blood rack, barbed wire, politician's funeral pyre, innocents raped with napalm fire. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not a protest song in your
Mm.
typical sense. It's pretty obvious that this is about Vietnam, and the band used to dedicate it to the Vice President of the United States at the time, Spiro Agnew, when they performed it live. Um, which is just, that's just, again, you're British and you're just going to talk about our best bud, Spiro Agnew. So it has all the aspects of a very true Crimson song. It's syncopated in parts, complicated jam sessions, atonal, discordant guitar solos, and these quieter, normal sections. It's manic,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly how you would want a song about schizophrenics to sound.
Yeah.
Manic sounds like this.
Yeah, Peter Sinfield did this thing with the lyrics here that I thought was really interesting that makes it even more representative of somebody with like a broken mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all the lyrics present these series of images and it's this pattern that repeats over and over and over. First line of each verse consists of two short phrases. So,
Mm-hmm.
like on the first one, cat's foot, iron claw. Second line is a single, more specific image. Third line is a longer phrase or a full sentence, and then the fourth line of every verse is 21st century schizoid man.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting that it's this repetition that's very the same, like very musical, very the same, but also this thing that like you see people who have had a mental break doing this same type of thing.
Yeah.
I also thought it was really interesting. The very first line, cat's foot, iron claw,
Mm-hmm.
is from a French fable called The Monkey and the Cat,
Mm-hmm.
which I read and sure.
Sure.
The synopsis is this: Bertrand the monkey persuades Raton the cat to pull chestnuts from the embers amongst which they are roasting, promising that he will share them. The cat scoops them out from the fire one by one, but burns his paw in the process. And every time the monkey grabs it from him and gobbles it up. And then a maid enters and scares them, and they both run off, and the cat doesn't get anything.
Hmm.
So,
well, I could find some political
yeah,
stuff in there.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely,
There's application.
sure, just a very, very weird fable.
You got to look for it. But there's so much going on in the song. It's all over the place. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it should be. And of course, what people know, younger people will know this because Kanye West sampled this song
Yeah.
in his song Power. And because of the kind of guy that Kanye West is, he never secured the license to use the sample. So he was sued. And the matter was eventually settled out of court for what I imagine is quite a bit of money.
Jesus doesn't need permission, Matthew.
No, he just Yeezy just does what he wants.
He just does what he wants. Yeah. I also thought it was really interesting. The middle section of this, the sort of jazz breakdown is titled Mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
um, written by Robert Fripp, and it's this interesting interplay between guitar and saxophone. Um, Also, a little guitar solo by Robert Fripp right afterwards that shows up on a few different, 100 greatest guitar solo lists.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very good. It's a very interesting little section in there. Saxophone solo by Ian McDonald. It was created with some overdubbing, with at least 2 tapes soloed together.
Mm.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, there's a lot of arguments. If you look in the comments sections for this album, on places like Genius song lyrics
Mm-hmm.
and song facts, places where I go to pull little snippets and tidbits,
Sure.
where normally I pull them and there's like 1 or 2 comments like, love this album, man, and like, oh, this was such a great time. I remember listening to this for the first time in the summer of 1972 when my girlfriend and I, and then it goes on forever. Uh, they're very interesting. This album, every single fact is like 5 people arguing
Yeah.
about whether it's right or not.
That's what I'm saying. These are that's exactly what I was alluding to at the beginning.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah,
you're staunch in what you believe it to mean, whether you're right or not, and you hold firm to those beliefs and you will defend it.
yeah,
Not just hold firm, not just be like, "No, you can't convince me." No, like, "No." Like you get cornered at a party, like, "I want to talk about King Crimson with you." I'm like, "No, you don't,
nah.
because you're going to lose." Because I have very strong opinions about this. That's exactly what it's like, and sometimes it's like if I run into another, like I run into another Rush fan that has stronger or has different feelings about something, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to engage in this because I know how this ends. You don't convince me, I don't convince you. We both walk away upset. So forget it.
Yeah,
Who cares? I
it's
like it.
a
You like it for different reasons. Whatever. I don't care.
yeah. This one was really interesting though because I didn't do my due diligence on this, so string me up. But
That's all right.
you can I think tell just from listening to it just in a nice set of headphones that there's definitely some overdubbing going on with that sax solo,
Oh
because there's
yeah.
spots where there's noises and reflections and echoes that are like that's the only way you could do that at the time. Makes perfect sense. There's a fact out there floating around. I think it's on Wikipedia and on Songfacts that says this was recorded in 1 take in the studio.
Well, that's horseshit.
That's horseshit. That's completely, not only is it horseshit, it's completely impossible. There's sounds, there's effects in here, there's things that couldn't be done live
Well,
at the time.
it's not
So,
only completely impossible, it's completely irrelevant. Who cares if it took
yeah,
3 takes? I mean,
right?
what difference does it make if it took 100 takes to do it? Like, it
Yeah.
sounds cool. Appreciate the fact that it sounds cool. The very end of go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, mine, this is totally irrelevant, but
Yeah,
this song, every time, the sound of the horns, the way that the music plays out and everything reminds me of Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare.
I can see that.
Every single time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that da, 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 from the horns,
Yep.
every time I'm like, oh no, that's a different song.
So,
Oh no, it's
what
a different song.
most people don't know, we only have 5 tracks to cover because most of these songs are really long.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'm not playing 4 clips from each song. So if you want to listen to it, go back and listen to it because there's a lot more than the minute that I play. That
Yeah.
these songs are very complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. So the very end of the song, which I am not going to play, is just a mess of chaos. But it was a
Yeah.
very calculated mess of chaos. So Fripp said that the ending is a homage to the endings that Duke Ellington would employ live in his sets, with everyone just going absolutely bonkers, like all the horns and the drums and everyone just going ah, and then boom, everything stops at once.
Yeah.
And then
Just dead cold stop.
that's his references to Ellington and how he was brought up musically. I think that's you would never know that because the
Yeah.
style is so far away from what Duke Ellington did. You wouldn't know that oh, that's a he's inspired by a jazz
Yeah.
artist to finish that really messy progressive song that way. So that's cool. So the next song is
Yeah.
called "I Talk to the Wind." I leave it to a great prog band to beat the hell out of you, leave you in chaos, and return on the song that could easily lull you, just completely lull you to sleep.
Right.
it tackles different introspective thoughts. It's a very religious song.
Mhm.
Doubt in religion, God being portrayed as the wind through the lyrics, meaning something we can't see. We only believe that it's there. However, its effects can be felt. There's the dominant instrument in this song is the flute, Ian McDonald's
Mhm.
flute, which I know you're happy about. Very, very excited.
Matthew,
Yes, Kyle.
this is an acceptable flute.
Yeah, and I figured you were going to say that because it's much more in the classical vein of the usage of the
Yes.
flute than you would find by
This
Ian Anderson in Jethro Tull. He's not
exactly.
breathing through it. He's not like talking through it like Ian Anderson does. It's very traditional.
Yes. I I tried to find a very good way to put this. It is an acceptable flute.
Well, look at you, growth. I
I don't
talk
know
to
about
the
that,
well.
but
There's some. I talk to the wind sounds like this.
I talk to the wind. My words are all carried away. I talk to the wind. The wind does not hear. The wind cannot hear. You don't possess me, don't impress me, just upset my mind. Can't instruct me or conduct me, just use up my time.
So it has very clear elements of the Beatles in it.
yes, it does.
And like we say about anything that was created around this time, of course it does. It was impossible to avoid. The melodies on the verses could have easily been pulled from a Beatles track from that era. The drum work on this song is exquisite.
Mm.
And this is one track that benefited so much from the work of the guy that I like to refer to as the prog whisperer, Steven Wilson from
Ooh.
Porcupine Tree. He has actually remixed this album a couple of times. And it's so much cleaner and more nuanced than it ever was on the original recording. You can hear so much more stuff going on,
Yeah.
including the gaps, including the emptiness, which makes this song kind of live, that it doesn't
Yeah.
lull you to sleep because there are gaps.
The remaster of this that is available on Spotify and iTunes is really, really good.
Yes.
And this is one of those things where I always debate this because on the one hand, I want to hear what did this sound like in 1970, right?
Right.
When it was brand new, when you went to the store and you bought it, or 1969, 1970, what did this sound like? But at the same time, we can make it sound so much better now, and as long as it's done well,
Yeah.
so that it's not like, because we got to talk about George Lucas for a second here.
Okay.
I think that there were things that Lucas, obviously with Star Wars, because it's the most famous case of somebody going back and adjusting their original art, right?
Ugh, yes.
I guess that's the friendly way to put it. Adjusting their original art. He went back, he changed things to make them more to his liking. The problem is, how many times is he going to do that? Every 20, 30 years, every time the technology improves. And he's like, actually, when we redid that the first time, it wasn't quite there. So let's do it again.
Mhm.
And then let's do it again. And let's do it again. And then how many times is that going to happen after he's gone? So it's people trying to interpret like, well, he was never happy with the way that this explosion looked the second time we did it. So we're going to go back and redo that again and again and again. I'm not okay with that. Like, I think that those cases are not great because it's not really adding anything special to it. It's just somebody trying to be like, well, this isn't what I originally envisioned. As long as it is something that is done to make it actually better without fully changing it, I'm 100% on board.
And I feel like it's an interesting case because I think what he does, he always says, due to the limitations of the technology at the time, I couldn't show what my true vision is. Now, other than the recording ability from that time. What we're hearing now is probably closer to what it actually sounded like in the studio
Yes,
than
that's a very good point.
I don't think they're changing it as much as removing the noise.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe boosting a little bit of this or a little bit of that. I think what we're hearing is probably much closer and to what it was supposed to sound like than him saying, "Well, this didn't really exist at any point, just in my brain." I'm like, "Well, so it didn't exist.
Yeah.
You were limited by the technology." They weren't limited by the technology. That's how it sounded live in a studio, most likely. The technology just couldn't capture it that way.
Yeah.
You just couldn't create something out of thin air to make it represent what you wanted to represent. But you still had,
So
I mean, yeah,
I guess in that case, then what I would say is I am okay with people using this to eliminate the shortcomings of the technology of the time.
Mm.
But if they go back and start being like, actually, we want to add in another instrument and we want to,
right, that's different.
make this sound like a different song, then it's different. And
Right.
that's some albums they do that. Some
Yeah,
albums
that's different. Like if they all of a sudden said, "You know what? It really needed a tambourine
Yeah.
in the," and so we added one in 50 years later. No, that's not okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Epita-
the
Go ahead.
No, I would say the lyrics here too are
Yeah.
very interesting. That they're a conversation between two people about religion.
Mm-hmm.
The straight man and the late man.
Man, late man.
The straight man here is somebody who's pretty religious. He's might still suck a lot of dick. If a quick informal study of very religious conservatives has taught me anything during my research, but generally he's thought of as a pretty religious person. The late man may or may not be religious, but he does offer rather ho-hum responses to everything that the straight man asks him about his religious beliefs. And then, like you said earlier, I think the wind is a representation of God.
Yep.
So they're talking to the wind, and God isn't really answering because he's quiet now.
Yeah.
So very, very interesting way to go about that type of a conversation. I really liked that as like a framing device.
Right. And this song was actually written during the Giles and Fripp era. So this is a holdover song before they were King Crimson. This is the only one that was a holdover. And one thing that I think people need to know, I can't prove this, but the band has always been very adamant that they were not taking hallucinogens during this period. That they may have smoked some weed, they probably drank a bunch of Lowenbrow or whatever, but they weren't into LSD and stuff like that. So you're just hearing musical experiments, not music and opening your mind experiments. And his conversations, I Talk to the Wind, are supposed to be more of a conversation, not like, "Oh, I was on a really weird trip and I think I saw God." I think it's more really trying to problem solve. So I can't verify this. This is what I've read. Obviously,
Interesting.
I don't know them personally. So Epitaph. Ooh, heavy on the Mellotron, guys.
Yeah.
Man. Lyrics. Go ahead.
I would say that timpani intro
Yeah.
is something out of like this giant orchestral piece or like a movie soundtrack where a huge storm is about to blow in. It's awesome.
It's such a good song. So this is my favorite song on the record. So the lyrics are written by Peter Sinfield and also Greg Lake. And Peter Sinfield in an interview said that it was a poem that I'd written when I had his own band, The Creation. It started with the words, and then it was very much a piece of ensemble writing. Ian MacDonald would come up with an idea, then someone else, and then Greg came up with an idea. I fear tomorrow I'll be crying, he says, sounds like something Greg would have written. So my feeling that it's also an anti-war song, another anti-war song. The lyrics are, the wall on which the prophets wrote is cracking at the seams. Upon the instruments of death, the sunlight brightly gleams. When every man is torn apart with nightmares and with dreams, will no one lay the laurel wreath when silence drowns the screams? Feels anti-war to me.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's my favorite song on the record. There's only 5 to choose from, but I love this song and some of the sounds you hear on this song are the beginnings of the sounds you're going to hear on Greg Lake's next band, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
As,
You can really hear that here.
Very much so. His vocals are so good, so dramatic. And this song, it has so many moving, sweeping changes through it. It's a very moving song to begin with. It's a very emotional song. It sounds like this.
The wall on which the prophets wrote is cracking at the seams. Upon the instruments of death, the sunlight brightly gleams. When every man is torn apart with nightmares and with dreams, will no one lay the laurel wreath when silence drowns the scream?
So
They
much
are
to the
literally,
song. Yeah.
yeah, they are literally writing the epitaph for humanity here. I think that's where they picked the name from.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg Lake said of this song, quote, "Epitaph is basically a song about looking with confusion upon a world gone mad. King Crimson had a strange ability to write about the future in an extremely prophetic way, and the messages this song contains are even more relative today than they were when the song was originally written," end quote. And I think that might be the most prescient like quote ever. So this song is 56 years old,
Yeah.
and these lyrics, like, between the iron gates of fate, the seeds of time were sown and watered by the deeds of those who know and who are known. Knowledge is a deadly friend if no one sets the rules. The fate of all mankind, I see, is in the hands of fools.
Oh, it's
So good.
We
It's
talked-
so good.
Yeah, it just tells us again that music sees it, reports on it, and nothing changes.
Yeah. Boy.
It's the exact same shit.
But this, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of these songs are quite long. This is 8 minutes and 47 seconds.
Yeah.
There's two instrumental breaks on here. The first one is called March for No Reason. Song comes back for a little bit more verse and chorus, and then it ends with another one called Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Both very, very cool, like, instrumental breaks that pull the song along really nicely.
So, did you see why they do that? Why a lot of these bands do that? The prog bands have, like, section 1 is called this, section 2 is called this, section 3 is called this. They do
No.
They do it for licensing. So,
that's
depending
smart.
on who writes what part, if someone wants to only license part 2 of Epitaph, then whoever wrote that, be that Greg Lake, gets more licensing credits than Robert Fripp does. So it was a way of breaking it all apart, because the songs were never written with these subsection titles in them. It was written just as a complete piece, and then they're like, well, let's break it up. So that's what they did.
Cool.
They just break it up.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Moonchild.
Oh.
Ooh, it's a product of the Flower Child movement, isn't it?
Sort of. Have you ever read the novel Moonchild? Novel, I'll put that in quotes.
No. I've heard
By
about
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, yeah.
So it is a very thinly veiled, like, hey, everybody, I'm actually a really good guy, and these guys that I don't like are real pieces of shit. And all my friends, we're all really good, and we want everybody to do all kinds of fun shit, and all of their friends are real dirtbags.
Oh.
The end.
The end. Oh, interesting.
More fictionalized than that, but it really is this. It's a really weird book. I read it when I was in, like, middle school, I think. Maybe early high school.
You were reading Aleister Crowley in middle school?
I was a weird kid.
Wow. Good for you.
I went through a phase where I was fascinated with this idea that within, like, 100 years, basically within what would become my grandparents' lifetime, we had gone from this society, like, you looked at the 100 years before that, right? when we industrialized.
Yeah.
So in 1800, it was completely normal that somebody was born in the dirt on a farm and died 60 years later in that same farm in the dirt.
Yeah.
Right. And between 1900 and 2000 ish at the time, that was a couple years in the future for me. We suddenly were in this position where it was like none of that existed anymore. You were now born in a building that was sterilized. You had, death rates had gone down. And I was fascinated with the idea that people were still trying to cling on to like old superstitions and beliefs and things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really struck me as interesting that so many people clung on to besides religion was mysticism, and how it led from these ideas around the late 1800s and early 1900s into this sort of, occultism that cropped up during World War II that was part of, the German state.
It's the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah, that kind of shit. And then how it sort of traveled through in the 60s sort of became the astrology,
mm-hmm.
and grew into all these weird hippie movements and things. And then how that kind of continued on all the way to the point where I was in the late 90s, and it was still ongoing, and people were coming up with new forms of it all the time. And it was just one of those things that kind of on my own path of discovery about, what is religion and what do I believe in and why are we all here type of a thing. Mysticism was one of the things that really stuck out to me as like a very bizarre, like, this is fake. You can see how they're faking it. And yet so many people want to believe in something greater that they're willing to ignore all that and forego it and give their money to these people who are clearly shysters. But Aleister Crowley was one of the biggest. Like politics, very similar. Didn't figure that out for about 20 more years, Matthew. But turns out these hucksters and flim flam people are also shysters. Yeah,
they're also politicians.
Who would have thought? But because of that, I read a lot of Aleister Crowley's books and read about him and stuff like that when I was in middle school. So, Moonchild is this novel where there's this group of white magicians who are portrayed as the good magicians, led by a guy named Simon If, who's, like I said, a really thinly veiled version of Aleister Crowley, and a group of black magicians, not as in skin color black, but as in they are evil.
Black, evil art, dark arts, as it were.
Dark arts type of magicians. And they are fighting over an unborn child, the Moonchild, who will be born with these amazing powers to basically destroy the earth with their mind.
Oh, shit. That means I got it. You know what? That's... Okay, so there's an Iron Maiden song called Moonchild, off their album Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which...
Yeah.
Those are almost word for word the lyrics, what you just said. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, damn. Now I got to go back and listen to it again.
The Black Lodge and the White Lodge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So this song is very much product of Flower Child movement, right? It's broken up into two parts, the dream and the illusion. Lyrics are weird, talking to the trees of the cobweb strange, sleeping on the steps of a fountain, waving silver wands to the nightbird's song, waiting for the sun on the mountain. You could tell me that they're not taking LSD. You can tell me that. But something tells me maybe they were. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. This song is over 12 and a half minutes long.
Yeah.
And it is long and weird. So the first 2.5 minutes are this very controlled song with this awesome, awesome muted drum sound that I think is so fucking cool. And then it turns into this free-form improv jam that they used to call a space jam, not the movie, but, and it goes for like 7 more minutes. It's got all these weird snippets in it. It's got Robert Fripp playing Surrey with a fringe on top from Oklahoma in it in the solo. It's so bizarre. It doesn't make any sense at all, but it sounds like this.
She's a moonchild, gathering
the drum part is so unique even for that time. And Neil Peart used to call out Michael Giles as one of his bigger
Oh, really?
influences. Yeah, and
That's cool.
just the creative way he played drums for that time is very, very cool. And so I only played like the normal part of the song. You want to listen to it?
Yeah.
It's your 10 minutes, man. To
Yeah,
listen.
I was going to say that. Yeah, there's 10 minutes of just freeform, all over the place noodling. So
Yeah, when I cut that track to include on the show, I had the waveform up, and I'm like, nothing really happens. There's so much empty space in that part of the song. There's like little bits and blurbs here, and the song made its live debut 48 years after its release in 2017.
Wow.
Which totally makes sense because I don't know how you recreate it, if you can recreate it, or if you should try to recreate it, because I don't know how you do those parts because it's so random and so strange. Like I feel like it was probably different every night they performed it, and I hate to use the word avant-garde because I feel that expression is a catch-all for something that just seems out of the ordinary. But this is avant-garde.
Yeah,
I think very innovative.
I think in this case that actually fits. That term fits this, versus just people using it to be like, oh, that's some weird art.
Right? Oh, it's avant-garde.
Any weird art, that's avant-garde.
Your hat's on sideways. Avant-garde.
Avant-garde.
No. So the last song, Court of the Crimson King.
Yes.
Title track, final song of the record. It itself is over 10 minutes long.
Yep.
But portions of it were edited, and it was released as a single. And was the highest charting single of their career. It got to number 8 on the Billboard Top 100. That is nutty.
Number 8 or number 80?
8.
Oh, I wrote number 80.
Well, I saw 8.
Wow.
Well,
8 is impressive. 80, I was
impressive.
like, congratulations, top 100. But
it's the only
8 is very impressive.
It's not only the highest charting single of their career, it is the only Crimson single to ever chart. The main part of the song is split into 4 stanzas, again, like we said, divided by an instrumental section called The Return of the Fire Witch. Song it hits its climax point at 7 minutes, but then it has another 2.5 minutes of whatever, the dance of the puppets, before it reprises at the end.
Whatever.
I don't know what it is, but Peter Sinfield said this about it. He said, Crimson King is about oppressors and manipulators. It also describes the various states of mind I was in when thinking about them. The characters I purposely left open, therefore the yellow jester is a manipulator I see, and perhaps other than you see. As I remember, the Fire Witch was an arms dealer I had read about. And the rest of the song is compiled like that. So he just had a bunch of weirdo ideas just jumping around.
Yeah. There's a lot of color imagery in this song. Because we hear about the Purple Piper, the Crimson King, the Black Queen, the Green Gardener, the Yellow Jester, Gray Mornings. It's interesting that they used color like that in this song as directly. They don't like allude to it, with the possible exception, even the Crimson King.
Yeah.
It's not really alluded to. It's like, that's the color.
That's the color.
Yeah. I think you might have gone over this a little bit earlier, but a Crimson King is a monarch that is particularly ruthless and has a lot of bloodshed during their reign. Thus crimson, obviously, like blood.
Sure.
In the time of the album, during the Vietnam War, in the middle of the Cold War, there's a really good chance, like we have already said, that this was directed towards Richard Nixon and a lot of the other leaders of the Western world, who, basically dragged the Cold War on much longer than it needed to. They dragged Korea, they dragged Vietnam, they dragged all these wars on that caused countless deaths and, did it for their own political and financial gain.
Definitely.
Which is pretty depressing.
It sounds like this.
Rusted chains of prison moons are shattered by the sun. I walk a road, horizons change, the tournament's begun. The purple piper plays his tune, the choir softly sing. Three lullabies in an ancient tongue for the court of the crimson.
I actually really like that. I think it's a really cool little, I don't even know what it is, piece, musical flair.
There you go. Flair. It's so cool.
Flair.
It's such a great song. And there was an Atlantic Records advertisement released at the time of this release, claimed that it featured the heaviest riffs on record since Mahler's Eighth Symphony. And then, because you started with a quote from Pete Townsend, I'm going to finish with one from Pete Townsend. He said, in response to that, "I know it had to cost £10,000 to make. I can't tell if it's worth it."
Which is such a good quote. I can't tell if it was worth it.
Right? Because it's so... You probably didn't know what you were listening to at the time.
Yeah.
Taking a step back, you're like, whoa, what are they doing? Yeah, nobody knows.
Yeah. Honestly, I am so glad you picked this album because it's one I'd never listened to from beginning to end. I'd heard In the Court of the Crimson King before.
Sure. And probably
just
21st Century
the song.
Schizoid Man, yeah.
And it's 21st Century Schizoid Man. But the rest I don't think I've ever heard before listening to this album from beginning to end.
Yeah, I'm
And
glad you liked it, yeah.
I absolutely see why so many people were influenced by this, why it was kind of the birth of prog. Depending upon who you ask, it could be considered the birth of prog rock, and why it's such an important album.
Absolutely. And we want to know what you think about it. You need to let us know your opinions on King Crimson and this album. If you have any history with it, get a hold of us at facebook.com/audiojudo or at Instagram at audio_judo, or you can find it at youtube.com/audiojudo. And you can also send us an email at info@audiojudo.com. We're happy to respond to those and engage in conversation with you about this record or any other record that might be on your mind. You have patrons.
You can also sign up for Patreon and send us messages there as well if you really want.
Please do that. Send us money.
Simon. Yeah. So shout it out loud here. Simon C., our UK consultant, and David Webb. Thank you both so much. Front row seats, John R. Backstage Pass, Scott K., Michael S., Michael A., and Christian S. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. We couldn't keep doing the podcast without all of you helping support us.
Right, and that here ends season 6.
Yeah.
And we will be back shortly with the beginning of season 7. And
God, we've been doing this so long.
I know. We have episodes coming up, obviously, Toad the Wet Sprocket. We have Heart. We have... I just saw it, and I can't remember what it was that you picked.
The surprise episode.
Huey Lewis. Huey Lewis.
That's true.
That one. And probably a lot of prog this season. So
I'm excited for that.
Right. So thanks for joining us. We will talk to you again in 5 minutes. 2 weeks.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.